Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am yet another jerk off here to tell you that UFC 300 is the greatest card of all time. All right. I was initially planning on holding that face for like 15 seconds, but in the moment I kind of felt you staring at my yellow teeth. So I thought, you know what? Let's just cut this short. Okay, I've got the card here in front of me. UFC 300. It is the greatest card of all time. I've been watching MMA religiously and the UFC religiously since 2002, even 2001, somewhat irreligiously before that. But I think this nothing comes close to this. And this isn't just a great card compared to other cards. This is a super card in today's MMA landscape, which is radically different from 20 years ago and even 10 years ago. And to have such a deep card with champions and contenders and these exceptional, exciting fighters, Bo Nickel, Diego Lopez. Some would consider that like the low of the card here because they're not champions or whatever in MMA. But yeah, this card is just fucking stacked. It is stacked from beginning to end. I mean, literally, the beginning is two former champions, Davison Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt. I don't know how to figure out the Hall of Fame thing, but they could easily be two Hall of Famers. This is just the greatest opening fight ever, I think. And Jim Miller versus Takanori Gomi might have even opened UFC 200. I don't know. It was up there early. There was also Gegard Mousasi versus Thiago Santos. Maybe it was that. But anyway, this card is stacked. Nothing comes close to it. And I just hope the event is as good as the card. A lot of people, a lot of fight fans conflate those two because they're stupid. The event is the card plus the fights, plus the action and the moments, Mark Coleman and fucking Matt Hughes walking out to the octagon in St. Louis or whatever. Little things like that. But in general, what makes the event is the fights plus the card. You can have the greatest fight night ever, like UFC Rockhold versus Bisping 1 in November of 2014. All finishes on that card. Fucking epic! Not really. The card wasn't that great. Louis Smolka beat whoever the fuck, some guy with a weird name by a sidekick and whatever. There was, they were all finishes. Some great action, but you don't remember the names, you don't remember the fighters, and I'm sure a lot of people don't even remember the winners. But you could also have a card that is completely stacked, like Pride Total Elimination 2005. Incredibly deep card. That was the opening round of Pride's middleweight tournament in 2005, and middleweight means light heavyweight, but that's a whole nother thing. But that's one of the greatest cards of all time, but the event sucked. It just sucked. Slow start, shitty, whatever. There was some action, but it just overall was a shittier event and didn't meet the expectations of the card. But this card here is starting at a 10 out of 10, like a fucking 12 out of 10, not to be a hack, but okay, 10 out of 10. You can't get better than this. And unless the fights absolutely suck, the minimum for the event ranking for this is like 8 out of 10. I mean, if all the fights suck, we still will have seen such crucial and important fights, such MMA history packed on this card where it is worth a rewatch over the more exciting UFC 294 or whatever, which I don't even know what the fuck that was. I don't know any events. I watch them all, but I can remember everything about like UFC 45, but nothing about UFC 245. No clue who that was. Actually, wait, I think it was Colby Usman 1. Don't hold me to that, though. But anyway, this is the greatest card of all time. The main event is, even by my standards, a disappointment to be honest. And I recognize that it is the light heavyweight championship, and the challenger, much like Yuri Prohashka in his last fight, was the former champion, the guy that never lost his belt, just relinquished it. So it is a title unification bout for the light heavyweight strap, which is historically maybe the most of the premier title in the UFC. I don't know. But It's an excellent main event that could headline any pay-per-view card and not be a disappointment. UFC 301, 299, 307, fucking excellent main event. But since it's UFC 300, even for me, it was a disappointment because I really thought they were going to get GSP to fight Chuck Norris with Triple H as the special guest referee. This is the shit that went through my head. And it's a disappointment when you don't get that super fight. Oh, GSP and Anderson or whatever. And what you're left with is just this excellent title fight, which it's getting the respect, and you know what, it's definitely getting more respect since it's been made the UFC 300 main event. But it was a disappointment to everybody, and I think I'm already past it, but hopefully others are as well. I was talking to my brother; he's not such a big UFC fan. He asked me who the main event is for UFC 300. I told him Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill, and he went, "Who versus who?" And I went, fuck you, brother." But don't worry, I'm gonna make up with him. But excellent main event, and the co-main event. Even though I think it could prove to be a mismatch, it's still an excellent fight. Strawweight championship, and you have the China angle, which I'm not totally invested in that angle and whatever. It's not like the biggest grudge match, but I am aware that Weili Zhang would really not like to lose to the other Chinese fighter. I almost said China woman. I know Chinaman is a fucking whatever, a no, but China woman, is that good? Either way. Yeah, I stick around any fucking social media YouTube platform long enough, especially going riffing like this. I will be fucking canceled. I give you my word on that. But excellent a co-main event, and I feel like it's being a little overlooked, kind of. Looked at as like this swing bout between the Justin Gaethje Max Holloway fight and the main event, but that's only because the card is so stacked. And I'll tell you, even if it's a one-sided fight, it's going to produce great fucking television and great MMA. And I do think Weili Zhang, if it is going her way, she's putting Yan away. But if we see an upset, that's even more epic television. And the featured bout, I guess you'd say, the BMF Championship, Gaethje versus Max Holloway. This is my favorite fight. This is my favorite fight ever booked. Nah, I don't know about that, but it's an excellent fight. This is halfway to a super fight. There is a title on the line, so maybe you can call it a super fight or whatever. But one of the greatest featherweights of all time, tippy top versus maybe the most exciting fighter in the history of the sport, Justin Gaethje, and a champion as well, interim UFC champion and BMF champion. Just this fight is the fight dreams are made of. Wow, that got really fucking gay there. Don't hold me to that, and dream bigger than this. But it's still a great fucking fight, and if that even halfway delivers on its promise, it's going to be fight of the night and an all-time classic. Can't wait for it. Then you got Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. This is a fight that is destined to produce excitement, as all Charles Oliveira fights are. And Arman Tsarukyan, he's not the big name here, but much like John Jones at UFC 100, he's destined to be a big name. And Arman's way past Jones at that point. Jones was really just getting going in the UFC. He had 2 victories. That was his 3rd fight, but there was a lot of promise there. Arman's already headlined UFC events, even though there's a lot more events these days. And Arman, he's had big fights, and it won't be long, I think, if I'm right about my prediction, till he's fighting for a title. So that's an awesome fight. And Charles, he's a Hall of Famer, world champion. He's got everything going, record setter, and uh, very close to Justin in terms of overall excitement. Charles might even be overall more exciting if you consider that, he even his losses are typically destructive. Then you got Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. I will be the first one to shit on its placement because, you disrespected Aljo or whatever. But I recognize what everybody else sees with Bo Nickel. He is as good as a prospect can get, as far as the hype goes. It doesn't get any bigger than this. And this may not be a big fight. And I know a lot of people are quick to shit on Cody Brundage. And, If you see my videos, I've shit on Cody Brundage in the past. But I think this is a very appropriate matchup. Very appropriate matchup. I don't think Bo Nickel, there's people calling for Bo Nickel to fight fucking whoever. Adesanya. Slow it down. I want to see him tested here more than anything. And that would be that would be epic. Seeing him with any sort of adversity and coming through with a big victory would be great. But especially if he lost the fight, it would just make for a gigantic moment. And even if you aren't so interested in Bo Nickel and you're rooting against him, you have to admit there's a lot on the line, and there always will be every time he fights. I mean, this guy, he's 5-0, just getting going, but every fight is crucial for Bo Nickel. Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. These guys are starting to heat up a little bit. Rakic called Prochazka a fake samurai, and Prochazka said, "Oh yeah," or something. I don't know. He had some retort, but either way, heated up a little bit. It's on low heat, 2 or 3, and I think this is definitely a fight that could headline its own fight night event. Rakic has been forgotten a little bit, but he was always a top light heavyweight. And Yuri Prochazka, since Rakic's last fought, has won and lost the world title, had one of the greatest fights ever with Glover Teixeira. And, he, even before that, that knockout over Dominic Reyes and Volkan Oezdemir, he made a splash bigger than most have ever made a splash in his first UFC fights. So that's an awesome matchup and a great preliminary main event. Calvin Kattar and Aljamain Sterling. This is an awesome fucking matchup. The odds prove it. They're razor thin odds. Calvin Kattar's coming off a knee injury and whatever, but he's one of the biggest, baddest featherweights, and Aljamain Sterling was one of the biggest, baddest bantamweights. And it's also a stylistical clash here that is, it's very interesting. This could prove to be a one-sided fight for either guy, I think, but I'm hoping Aljo's got just enough strength and everything going for him to get Kattar to the ground, but not enough to be dominant, and these guys clash and give us a competitive fight. That would be awesome. Boston versus New York. But both those guys are, Aljamain's headline pay-per-views, and Kattar, he's headlined plenty of UFC events. He is a UFC star. Holly Holm and Kayla Harrison. This is, like I mentioned in my pre-fight video, whatever, under different circumstances, this could have been considered halfway to a super fight, maybe with different timelines. But Holly, she's been a star since November 15th, 2015, the greatest day of my life. And it's when she knocked out Ronda Rousey. And Kayla Harrison is already a millionaire, already a star, a television star, and she's got an incredible MMA record. She may not have beaten half the girls that Holly beat, and she's going to get a chance to here in the UFC, but the hype is real with Kayla Harrison. It's not like Holly Holm has fallen off a cliff, where that's why she's such a gigantic underdog. It's because Kayla Harrison is, and up until she lost her last fight, to Larissa Pacheco, not her last fight, but her up until she lost that fight, everybody was on board and saying this girl's destined to be a star and one of the greatest fighters of all time, and she's gonna get her shot here. Sadiq Youssef and Diego Lopez. This is one of those lower profile fights, but I still say this is one where if you slapped it onto the main event of a fight night right now, with Diego Lopez being 2-1 in the UFC or whatever, I would not complain. Diego Lopez is one of those guys who made a gigantic splash, much like Yuri Prochazka, even though he lost his debut, Diego. That's arguably his best performance considering the opponent. But he's just got so much hype and so much going for him. And if you give him long enough to compete in the UFC, he might prove to be more exciting than Charles or Gaethje. Who knows? This guy is pure excitement, though, and on that alone, he could headline a fight night event. Sadiq Youssef, he's been there. His last fight was a fight night against Edson Barboza, and he was the main event. He's got an incredible record, really good UFC opposition, and nobody has steamrolled him. Nobody. Edson Barboza almost got killed in that fight, and Arnold Allen, he was. Sadiq was the last man standing, but Arnold just scraped by with a decision. Sadiq's one of the best fighters in the world, and hopefully he can remind everybody at UFC 300. I say hopefully because I bet on him, but I like Diego too, even though I wish he would cut his fucking hair. You know what? I might cut his hair. I might go cut his fucking hair in the middle of the night. Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. This is a fight that I do think could headline a fight night event. Renato Moicano, he's been there and he's been one of the best fighters for a long time since he was a featherweight. But he's a guy that has turned a corner promotionally in the last year or two. He's really turned it up. This guy speaks better English than I do, and he's got incredible post-fight interviews. He's just really gained a lot of traction, and this would be a very high. It is a very high-profile fight, but this would be very high on any other UFC card instead of the prelims here. Jalen Turner, I hate his nickname. I hate tarantulas. I hate the fact that tarantulas exist. I think about them. There are like for a minute every day. I just think about tarantulas and what I can do to end them and eradicate them. But I don't think it's going to happen. But Jalen is pure excitement and 14 wins, 14 finishes. The guy's a total killer. And I think with his recent knockout of Bobby Green, which I believe was a co-main event, he could easily be headlining a fight night event right now as well. Excellent fight right there. And I'm bringing up all these potential headliners. They could headline just to reinforce how good this card is. This is the greatest card of all time. You can go back and look at fucking Jim Miller versus Mac Danzig at UFC 100. That couldn't headline a fight night event, even though you look back and go, but Jim did headline events. That's not how it works. Next fight, Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. This is another fight that between two girls that have headlined fight night events. Jessica Andrade, world champion, won via slam. She's one of the most, I'd say the most violent and dangerous female, pound for pound. I'm sure there definitely are girls that can kick her ass, but pound for pound, nobody is more dangerous than Jessica Andrade. And that alone is that alone is worth the eyeballs. That alone is what makes her a star. But on top of that, she's an elite fighter and has been for a long time in like 3 different weight classes. Marina Rodriguez, she's had a little hot and cold streak lately, but just from the work she did in that opening streak in the UFC where she went like 6-1-1, she's been a very high profile fighter and a main eventer. And despite that loss to Lemos kind of recently, she is not far off from a world title shot at all. I mean, this could be it, this fight here. Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. This is a fight between the two veterans of all veterans. As Cowboy Cerrone's in there, I guess. But these two guys have both headline fight night events. The UFC has promoted both of them, and they're both stars in their own right. Jim Miller's got a bunch of records. This is the second fight of the night, and this is a fight that I think on any other card, or most cards, I say any other card. I've said that a lot for this video here, but if all these fights were on other cards, then I might not be saying the same shit. But Jim Miller versus Bobby Green on any other card, I would think is the people's main event, the fight that everybody's looking forward to the most. And here we're getting it at 7 p.m. if you're a New Yorker. Just the greatest fucking card of all time. And the first fight of the night is Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt. World champions, Hall of Famers, violent fighters. Both of them are killers. Cody Garbrandt, he had that incredibly rough streak losing his belt. But before that, when he won the title against Dominic Cruz, I would have thought he would be champion for, an era, whatever that means. 3 years, 5 years, whatever. I thought he was there to stay. Things came crumbling down, but he has momentum. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, has been knocked out in a matter of years, and he's still only 32 years old or whatever. So he's a star champion, and I'm not quite ready to write him off, even though I'm picking against him. And Davison Figueiredo, I don't know what he's going to do at bantamweight, but I wouldn't put it past him to make some serious waves. I already feel like he has, of course, beating Rob Font. And with a win over Garbrandt, he could be a win away from a title shot. I don't know, probably not. But he is one of the top fighters immediately at bantamweight. And previously, he's one of the greatest flyweights of all time. Easily one of the greatest, and of course, a very violent, dangerous fighter. I think that's kind of gotten lost on some people as of late because he's been fighting Brandon Moreno 7 times, and that guy's tough to finish. But if my prediction's right anyway, we'll see some violence from him on Saturday. And yeah, this is just another fight that could easily headline a main event of a fight night. And in the past, of course, could have been the headliner of a pay per view. So this is the greatest fight night of all time, and nothing comes close. Nothing comes close. People will say to me, hey, Pride 33 was the greatest card of all time. No, you could argue it was the greatest event of all time. I was there. I think it was fucking amazing, but it doesn't even fucking come close to this. Doesn't even come close. There's one person making his or her UFC debut on this card, and it's Kayla Harrison, who, again, on any fight night, she would be the main event in her UFC debut, much like Justin Gaethje was when he fought Michael Johnson. This card is fucking stacked from beginning to end, and don't let anybody convince you that anything else is better. UFC 217, one of the greatest events ever, doesn't fucking come close to this. And all the Pride events, I love Pride Shockwaves, all of them. Go watch every fucking Pride event you can get your hands on. Pride Shockwaves and the Grand Prix events, Total Elimination, Final Conflict. Every Final Conflict in Pride was one of the greatest events ever. But the cards themselves do not compare with this. They do not compare. So I'm putting my stamp of approval, which means absolutely fucking nothing. But I am saying this is the greatest event, greatest card of all time. And now let's see what kind of a fucking event it is. Can we get some action? Like, share, subscribe, all that horseshit. Check out my other videos.